So I've done a lot of videos talking about basketball players and a few more on football players, but so far I haven't ventured out into any other sports. But as we all know, sports medicine involves more than just those two sports, and who can ignore what possibly is the most popular sport in the entire world? Welcome back everybody. For those new, my name is Brian and I'm a doctor and a sports fan, and it's my goal on this channel to combine those two interests to help look at different sports injuries and explain them in a way that's easier for you to understand and hopefully learn from. Today we're going to be venturing out into a new sport, and specifically we're going to be talking about Neymar and the 5th metatarsal injury that he suffered most recently. For all my non-American friends watching, I'm going to say soccer in this video. I know that's not what you call it, but here that's what it's known to me as, and so I'm going to say soccer. Apologies if that's not the correct thing in your world. Now, Neymar suffered an injury to his 5th metatarsal back last year that actually required surgery, but this time around they're saying they're going to manage it conservatively, meaning without surgery, and he's going to be out an estimated 10 weeks. In the video today, we're going to break down, first of all, the footage of the injury to see if we can explain when and what exactly happened, and then we're going to take a look at the anatomy of the foot to help explain what exactly a 5th metatarsal is and what that means. Next, I'm going to help educate you on some basic principles that we consider as doctors when it comes to how we define these different types of foot fractures, and some things we'll consider whenever it comes to choosing whether or not to manage them with surgery or conservatively. As usual, let's get right into it and take a look at the footage of the injury. Now, we can see on the play here there's a lot of just kind of stumbling around like there always is in soccer, but if you look really close and kind of go in slow motion, it looks like about right here is where he kind of lands a little bit awkwardly on that right foot and then seems to kind of come up limping a little bit after that. Next, let's take a look at our foot anatomy to learn more about these different bones and structures involved in the foot. And to do that, today I'm going to pull out my iPad, try something new here with doing some drawing on the actual screen to help explain a little bit better what's going on. So here we have an anatomy model of the right foot, and we're looking down on top of the foot. Now, a couple of anatomical directions for you to know. Whenever I say distal, that means this direction, so farther out towards the toes. Whenever we say proximal, that means more closer in towards the heel or closer towards the body. Some of the different bones that we're not going to spend as much time on, but this bone underneath here is your calcaneus, that's the big heel bone. This one sitting on top is your talus. These various bones are the navicular, the cuneiforms, the cuboid bones, don't really matter in this case. And then these group of long bones right here are your metatarsals. All of these out here are your phalanges. Now, the way we number the metatarsals is from inside out or medial to lateral. And so this is number 1, this is 2, 3, 4, and the one we care about right now, the 5th metatarsal. And you can actually feel this on yourself. If you feel on the outside of your foot, about the middle spot, there's a kind of sharp little bump that sticks out. That is this sharp little bump that we can look at right here on the screen. That's that little base of your 5th metatarsal. Now, actually, of all the fractures in the foot, that base of the 5th metatarsal is the one that we see most commonly. So this isn't a rare thing by any means. Whenever that bone breaks, it's typically at the base or towards that proximal portion. Next, I want to introduce the idea of the 3 zones of the base of the 5th metatarsal to help you understand how we kind of classify some of these injuries and how we decide how to treat them. The first is zone 1, which we find more here right at the base of the 5th metatarsal. Next, at that junction we call the metadiaphyseal region is going to be your 2nd zone. And then further out proximal is zone number 3, more up towards the actual shaft of the 5th metatarsal. And within each of these zones we have different types of fractures that are most common. Looking first here at zone 1, down at the very base, most often they're called avulsion fractures. So we have various tendons that come down and insert on these various bones, and one of them is called the peroneus brevis that runs down and inserts right there on the base of the 5th metatarsal. You can imagine if that tendon gets pulled or twists in a funny way, that it could potentially pull a piece of that bone off and cause a fracture in that bone, and that's what we would call an avulsion fracture located in zone 1. The way we manage those, if nothing is displaced, meaning everything is still lined up really well, we often just do it conservatively by putting someone in like a walking boot or a cast and give it a few weeks to heal on its own, and it's not that serious and doesn't often require surgery. Now, if it's displaced, where the actual bone segments have been pulled away from each other, then you often are doing surgery. Now, next, the types of injuries that we see located more here in zone 2 is what you call a Jones fracture. There was a guy a long time ago with the last name of Jones who defined fractures in this region, so we call it a Jones fracture. And those are a lot harder to heal. And the reason for that is because there's not as good blood flow in that specific area of the bone. So you can imagine if you're trying to heal a fracture, you need blood, you need nutrients, you need oxygen to heal. And in that particular area, just the way our anatomy works, we don't have as good of blood flow as we do in the rest of that bone. So these Jones fractures are notoriously more challenging to heal because of that. And oftentimes doctors will choose to go quicker to surgery because they know that it's going to be harder to heal. And for an athlete trying to get back to their sport, they don't want to risk that big long time and energy on something that might not have a good outcome. And now, of course, going up here to zone 3, those are fractures in that more portion of the shaft of the bone. And those aren't as common, but they can certainly happen. And the way we choose to manage those depends entirely on how much separation there is in the bone. So if we look here and the base of the bone is like this, and then there's a fracture, but the fracture piece is like way off here, and that angle between those two is above a certain amount, then they choose to do surgery. But you can imagine if it's a fracture, but everything is still nice and in line, that's going to have a much better chance of healing and coming together, and so you're not going to be as inclined to need to do surgery. So criteria 1 is based on the actual angle of offset in those bones. The second thing they'll look at is how much actual just shift there is in the bones. So if I've got a fracture and the bone piece is like way over there, that's a huge space, and so they're going to be more prone to do surgery to bring those back together. As opposed to, again, if everything in that fracture is nice and in line, then there's no real reason to go in there because things are pretty likely to just heal up on their own. So we don't know exactly where Neymar's injury was in the foot bone. We don't know if it was an avulsion fracture towards the base. We don't know if it was a fracture in the shaft, but either way, we know that it wasn't severe enough to where the doctor said, let's do surgery. Now, the interesting thing about all this is you might remember he had an actual fracture to that bone last year, I believe it was, and had a screw put in the bone. So I don't really know how that changes things in terms of if this is a similar fracture or if it's in a completely different location. That would depend a lot more on the actual knowledge of his specific case. So certainly it makes it probably more challenging. Anytime you've had a previous injury, it's always harder to recover and heal from a new injury. But bottom line, I hope that was helpful to take a look and explain what the fifth metatarsal is, what different areas get fractured, how we classify them, and then some general principles about how we choose whether or not to go to surgery. I hope you all enjoyed the video, kind of branching out into some new sports. Don't worry, we're going to talk about some hockey, we're going to talk about baseball come baseball season, pretty much covering every major sport and major injuries that you can learn from. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video. Bye.